Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. This has been an awesome, great conference. So thank you for all of those who put it on. So today I'm going to speak with you about leading distributed engineering teams. Like I said, my name is Darva Satcher, and I'm a director of engineering at GitLab. And GitLab is a company that builds tools to support the entire DevSecOps lifecycle. So we have tools to support requirements, design, building your code and source code, CI/CD, delivering, deployment, and monitoring your code. So we span the entire spectrum of a software development lifecycle. And we are a 100% global organization, and we all work remotely. So I've had a lot of practice managing teams in a distributed environment. So currently, I manage 4 engineering teams. We're 4 engineering managers who manage teams. I have team members in Minnesota, Switzerland, Australia, UK, and even Portugal. So I get a lot of practice in collaborating and working well and effectively across the world. So today I'm going to touch on 3 main points. Not working in the office, 3 rules that you must follow to be successful in managing a remote team distributed across the world or even just within your own country. And what is our secret sauce? How do we do it? I have been working from my home remotely since 2011. I've only been at GitLab for 4 years. So I was working remotely well before the pandemic. And as you can see, 53% of tech employees were still going into the office prior to the pandemic. As of now, we're at about 12%. So there is a good number of people who were thrust into this new world and didn't really have the skills or the time to prepare or the right training. So today I'm going to give you some best practices and some tips to be successful in this environment, to be successful leading teams in this environment. There are 3 types of distributed teams. There's locally distributed, nationally distributed, and globally distributed. And locally distributed is when you're within the same time zone, same city. Nationally is when one person's in, let's say, California and the other one's in New York. And globally is when someone like myself is in Atlanta and my direct report is in Australia, just to give us a common vocabulary. All right, the first thing you must do is reduce your dependency on sync. So imagine I live in California and I'm working with someone who lives in New York. Typically, we both have an 8-hour workday, but we really only have 5 hours where we're both in the office at the same time because of the 3-hour time difference. So in that case, we have 5 hours to collaborate, 5 hours to meet, 5 hours to work together synchronously. So you want to reduce any activities you have to do synchronously. The second thing you must do is document everything. Document what you did before, what you're doing now, and what you're going to do. Because you might not be in the office when someone has a question about something, and it's much more efficient for them to go self-service that information by reviewing documentation. And the third item, always avoid ambiguity. These 3 items are good whether you're remote or distributed or not, but you want to avoid ambiguity. For example, let's say this morning I come into the office and I send a Slack message to my direct report who lives in Australia, and I say, I need a status on the charts ASAP. I wait until the next morning and I wake up to what charts? Right? So I've lost a whole day because I wasn't specific. So it's very, very important to avoid ambiguity. Next, we'll go into our secret sauce. Our secret sauce is actually CREDIT. CREDIT is an acronym for collaboration, results, efficiency, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, iteration, and transparency. And these also happen to be the GitLab values. I will discuss how each one of them helps support working in a remote and distributed environment. Collaboration. So it's really important to be able to collaborate well so that you can produce a really good product, regardless of what your business is. Some solutions that we've employed at GitLab are what I personally like to do is get a good idea of what my counterparts' key performance indicators are. For example, if I have an initiative that I'm trying to implement and the security team has a different initiative and they're conflicting with one another, that kind of shapes and molds the way I approach my conversations and collaborations with them. So it's important to understand what's important to your counterparts so that you can better work together. Group conversations. So at GitLab, we record group conversations that say what we've accomplished over the recent quarter, what our goals are for the next quarter, and different organizational changes. This, again, is very important for me to know. It's important for me to know what product has plans on doing, because I also have plans in engineering. And in some cases, we can align very easily. In other cases, we might have to have some additional discussions. So I attend group conversations. Overall, I'm trying to get a sense of what's important to my counterparts. And then there's GitLab issues. We use issues to collaborate across time zones. For example, if I'm proposing to make a major change in how we classify a specific process, well, I might need products input, securities input, reliabilities input, and we can all interact asynchronously on a GitLab issue. And it helps us expedite finding solutions and collaborating because you're not waiting for someone to get into the office. Now, one of my favorites is to have skip level meetings. Now, I'm very formal in my skip level meetings and I have an agenda. Skip level meetings are when I meet with my direct reports. So my direct reports are engineering managers and their direct reports are engineers. I get an opportunity to actually interact with my engineers or with the engineers through skip level meetings. So I start off my meetings with, what have you done lately? How awesome have you been? And then I say, thank you, right? And then I ask them about their team. Are there things that their team could be doing differently to improve collaboration or efficiency? I'll ask them, who's done a great job? Can you give me any examples? And then I'll ask about their manager. Is there anything your manager could be doing differently to support you? And then I ask about myself. Is there anything I can do to support you? This gives me an opportunity to support the engineers as well as the managers who are also supporting the engineers. And one example is one of the engineers felt overwhelmed with information because we are so async. There's a Slack channel, there's Google Docs, there's issues. And so they were wondering, could we just kind of distill the information in a summarized format? And I was like, definitely. So I worked with their manager and suggested that I create a GitLab issue, which was a newsletter that said everything at the create stage, my stage, and then have the engineering managers take that and make a few modifications and disseminate that to their teams. We received a lot of great feedback, and this came from collaboration via a skip level meeting. All right, so now what we're gonna do is, if you have any questions, if you could ask them in the Slack message or Discord, and I will get to all the questions at the end of the talk. So this is your time. Ask me any question that you would have about a challenge that you have related to collaborating across time zones and distributed teams. All right, next I will go into results. So it's really important for us to achieve results. We want to reward results and we want to produce results. There's a few different ways that we produce results. We recognize team members in Slack channels, so there's a thank you channel. We also give out rewards annually, and we would nominate people via Slack and award people and make announcements via Slack. And then we would have a recorded Zoom video where we're actually have our CEO and various leadership say thank you and highlight the accomplishments of others. So that can be done asynchronously. We also have virtual training, which allows people to train, again, asynchronously. You don't have to be in the office at the same time as everyone else to learn how to upskill. One of my personal favorites is how we manage incidents. So I was an incident manager, which is kind of like the ringmaster of how to manage an incident when it occurs. So one morning, I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and immediately I'm informed by leadership that there's an ongoing incident and they need updates ASAP. Okay, all right. So the first thing I do is I get up to speed. I go to the Slack channel, I look at Zoom recordings related to this, and I look at the GitLab issue just to get up to speed. At that point, I ensure that all of the different counterparts are engaged: security, support, engineers on call, reliability. There's a lot of people who I've got to keep engaged. I'm asking for status updates up until I'm off of my shift. The incident was still going on after I got off my shift. The incident was still going on after I left work that evening. The incident was still going on when I went to sleep. So the next day I wake up and I have to report on the status of this incident to leadership. Well, overnight they had already mitigated the incident earlier, but overnight they had identified the cause and they had a complete root cause analysis. They had communicated to the customer. They had an executive summary. They had documented corrective actions. And I was able to report on all of this to leadership the next day. So it was a very efficient way of actually using async as a superpower. Again, this is your opportunity to drop questions in the chat. The next value I'll discuss is efficiency. So we want to be efficient to prevent productivity roadblocks. Here are a few solutions that we have done at GitLab. Async meeting attendance is the best thing ever. The reason why I love it is because I can literally be at 2 places at one time. So the way this works is we have a meeting. Let's say we have a weekly meeting every Wednesday. By Monday, there's an agenda already for that Wednesday meeting. Between Monday and Tuesday, everyone, regardless of where you live, what your time zone is, can start engaging asynchronously with this meeting agenda. So much so that by the time Wednesday comes along, some of the items have already been discussed and we can just skip them. In some circumstances, people were not in the time zone of the sync meeting, but they were still able to contribute to the meeting asynchronously. And me, I had 2 meetings scheduled at the same time. So now I can totally skip this one and go to the other one. So async meeting attendance is fantastic. Mid-year and annual reviews. All right, so you can imagine how it feels when you have 3 weeks to do annual reviews and review annual reviews for a large organization. Well, if you've been having very comprehensive one-to-one meeting agendas, like I have, there'll be a lot of data in there. So in my one-to-one meetings with my direct reports, I often integrate feedback in those meetings. We talk about their accomplishments. We talk about their opportunities for improvement, so that I have a huge track record and a huge history of information I can pull from to do my annual reviews and to do my mid-year reviews. So documentation is really what helps me become really efficient. And the example I like to give you about efficiency is my onboarding to GitLab. So when I had started GitLab, I had already been managing teams remotely, but I had never onboarded remotely. So I was a little nervous. I knew that I was going to wake up in the morning and show up and there would be like nobody, right? So I did. I woke up in the morning, 6 a.m. like normal, and no one was on my left, no one was on my right. It was just me. And a GitLab issue. This GitLab issue had checkboxes of who to contact to set up for security, training on different compliance matters, videos that were welcomed from various team members, organizational structure information was in the handbook. I had a long list of to-do items, and maybe about 3 to 4 hours into my day, I met my manager from Austria, right? So I felt very supported, and it was a very efficient process because my manager only really had to spend 25 minutes with me. And I pretty much onboarded myself. So I was truly a manager of one in that scenario. And we do that for everyone. It's not just for leadership. Again, it's time for questions. So I would say just drop them into the chat. All right, I will continue to move on. Diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So how do we ensure that everyone feels valued and respected, included and supported? We do this by being very intentional. Imagine, well, I'll tell you my story. I don't know if you can imagine it. I would go into the office when I used to go into the office at my previous position, and there were not a lot of people who looked like me in a few different ways, right? Who I work with on a day-to-day basis. But the building was 3 stories. I would walk in the building, there would be people who look like me, maybe in a different role. I'd say hi, go to the next level, say hi. I had an opportunity to at least see people who, were kind of from my community, had topics that were hot topics in our community we could discuss. But when you're remote, that's hard to find your community. So the organization needs to be intentional. And when you're distributed, it's even harder. So one thing we have are resource groups. So it gives the communities a safe space to talk and support one another and start initiatives. We also have reverse AMAs with our CEO. So our CEO meets with the different underrepresented groups and just hears directly from us what's on our mind, what's top of mind, where do we see opportunities for improvement, where are we winning? So it's a great opportunity for feedback to be given directly to the senior leadership of the organization. We also, the senior leadership is very committed to funding initiatives. There are many initiatives that are out there. We have worked with an HBCU, a historically Black college, in hosting and delivering an advanced software engineering course, but leadership gave us the budget to do that. So there's a role for leadership to play. And one of my favorites is mentoring. So I have mentored across the world. I have distributed mentoring examples. So recently I mentored 3 women, one from Poland, one from Germany, and one from Philadelphia. And each one had different goals in our mentoring relationship. One was an engineer who wanted to be an engineering manager. The other was an engineer who wanted to be a product manager. And the other was a support engineer who wanted to be a senior support engineer. And really what I did was set up sync and asynchronous one-on-one meetings because of the time differences. And I also pre-populated agendas, interacted a lot asynchronously with the agendas. Some of the same things that I've done for other meetings, I've employed those tactics. And in some cases, specifically with the product manager case, I had to reach out to product managers, maybe in the time zone of that team member who could shadow them and allow them to watch them do some work. So there was just a lot of collaboration across the world just to support 3 mentees. Another opportunity for questions about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and different challenges maybe that you've had that I could help out with. Iteration. It is very important to have an iterative work environment. In my previous positions, when I used to go into the office, I could see engineers just really struggling with a problem and really kind of going round and round, right? When you're virtual, when you're remote, when you're distributed, it is very hard to see that. If I'm in one time zone and they're in Australia, I wouldn't even be able to see it literally, even if they were talking about in Slack, because I'm not on Slack at the same time. But I can't look at Slack when I get back into the office. So what iteration is, for those of you who this might be a new concept for, it's imagine building a home. You build it, the exterior, brick by brick by brick by brick. You don't just build a home. Well, that's what iteration is. We build software brick by brick by brick by brick. And sometimes engineers can get stuck on a brick for weeks. That's not good. That leads to missed deliverables. So the first thing we have to do is train engineers on how to work more iteratively. And so we offer asynchronous iteration training to do that. In GitLab, we also have this concept of tracking epics and issues. So if a brick seems like it's taking like 2-3 weeks, we say that brick is an epic. Break it down into smaller bricks. It's so much easier to review code that's smaller. It's so much easier to revert code if you have to. It's so much easier to deliver and deploy code that's smaller. So we really employ the team members to do that. But what happens when they're not doing that, right? So I have something that I call an iteration check-in. So I asked the engineering managers on some quarterly cadence to take a look at what we consider merge requests, which is basically a bulk, a block of work, and see how long it took engineers to complete a merge request. If there's some merge requests that took too long, maybe 3 to 5 days, maybe 5 to 7 days, maybe 31+ days, the engineering managers need to work with that specific engineer and maybe coach them on how to break things down, or maybe it was an exceptional situation. So we're able to do this asynchronously. For one, we have issue weights on the issue so that we can tell that if someone says an issue weight is 5, they need to break that down. So being transparent about how long it's going to take to do the work and us having visibility into how long it's taking them to do the work helps us manage iteration. Again, questions on iteration, please drop them down in the chat. Transparency. Now, this is our final value, making sure information is available and accessible to all, regardless of where they live. So we have many ways to be transparent here at GitLab. We have our handbook, which documents all of our policies and processes. So there are times when I wonder, oh, how much is the GitLab maximum for expensing a new monitor? I don't have to call anyone up. I can just go to the handbook and self-service the information right there. I don't have to wait for someone to be in the office synchronously. So reducing dependency on sync. We have a YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is called GitLab Unfiltered, and GitLab Unfiltered has video recordings of product kickoffs, team meetings, architectural discussions, pair programming. Pretty much most things we do, we record on YouTube. So if you're not available during the time zone of a meeting, you're still able to view and get the same exact content that you would have gotten synchronously. Also, in terms of change management, think about every time there's a significant change, everybody wants to know why. Why are you making this change? So we create a GitLab issue that documents why we're making the change, what the changes that we're making, what the impact of making the changes, what the impact of not making the changes. And then we invite everyone to provide feedback. Everyone means everyone in all of the countries that work for us. So GitLab issues are a great way to, of course, collaborate as well as to manage change management and to communicate it transparently. So the one thing I'll leave you with is we don't just communicate and support GitLab. We're very transparent to the world, right? We have a public channel. So publicly, we're sharing information about working remotely. Publicly, we're sharing information about how to use our products, best practices, sharing information about CI/CD, you name it, we're sharing it on our channel. So we are literally transparently supporting the world with some of these videos. So we take that value very seriously. All right, now I'm at the end of my talk, so we can start with any questions that anyone might have.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much. We do have questions over in the Keynote channel, so I'll go ahead and throw these up here for you. Let's see, we'll kick off with, how do you show progress on your work assignments to my superior in a simple and efficient way for him to check in on asynchronously? So this is kind of back on the asynchronous part of your discussion.
Sure. So in GitLab, we have something called a GitLab issue, and every issue has detail on what the issue is, and you can see all the collaboration on that issue. So if it looks like someone was blocked by someone else, it will be listed in that issue. Now, we also have issue boards that show all of the issues that are open and what their statuses are. They could be in code review, they could be in review, they could be in design. And so leadership can actually look at the board and drill down into the issue without having to interact with you at all without having to slow you down at all.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you can be really data driven if everything's so transparent. Like everything can be in a comment on an issue or in a code review or in a ticket or on just a commit. Like it adds new depths to it. I think the developers don't understand how important that communication might actually be.
Yeah, and there's a lot of metadata tied to each issue. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of information. And so as a leader, I can look at all of the issues for my organization, or all of the security issues for my organization, or all the past due issues or the quality issues. So there's a lot of different ways to, it's like a big database and you can just sort the information. I love databases.
I know that about you. I knew you like databases. So with the next question up is, let's see here. How does GitLab ensure new hires are a good fit for the culture?
Well, we take that in consideration in our interview process, which is actually documented in our handbook. So before people come to work for GitLab, it's very advisable that you look at our handbook and you look at the credit values. The credit values give you examples of what do we mean by collaboration. And people first need to make sure that they're a good fit in their mind, that we're a good fit for them. But in our interview process, we're looking for people who exhibit those values.
Yeah, I agree with that 100% as well. Let's see, next question. I'm going to read it as is. So it's from Al Spigert. I know mostly remote employees who come into the office once a week. In your experience, is this in general enough in-office time? And there's some follow-on questions here.
Okay, that's an individual question for people. For me, I don't need to go into the office all the time. I've recently decided to go to a co-working space, which GitLab actually supports. I haven't worked in the office in 14 years and I've been very effective. I've had multiple promotions, so you don't need to go in. But I decided that I'm an empty nester and I'm missing seeing people. So now I'm going into the office. So at GitLab, you do get a choice if they will pay for a co-working space, but I am extremely effective when I work from home.
So in the follow-on question, maybe we can just speak to it maybe in general for tech companies is there much added benefit to coming in 2 or 3 days out of the week as opposed to just like say working from home, or is once a week enough?
I think for me and what I've seen working from home, you're much more productive just because you have fewer distractions. But if you're the type of person that needs that one-on-one engagement, then I could see why you might want to, just because you don't want to be by yourself. But I find that the less I leave the house, the more productive I am. That's how it's been. As a leader, when I was in the office, people were always coming to my door and I just couldn't get a lot done. And now I can kind of control my calendar a lot more. And engineers, they're able to stay heads down a lot longer and focus on something without getting distracted. It's easier to create focus time when you're remote. Focus time in person is a little bit harder because you literally have to tell people, don't come to my cubicle. It's not an easy way to do that all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Next question is from Mario. If you're not in management or leadership, what are some ways to bring these ideas into your workplace? That's a really, if they want to take this back to their workplace, how do they go best about that?
All right, the first thing I would do, I tell everybody, is take over your agendas, your one-to-one meetings with your manager. If your manager does not have a template, create a template, create an agenda and start populating that agenda before the meeting, and just let your manager know, hey, I've already updated a few notes in our agenda. If you want, you can respond to those and we can maybe skip some of those during the session. I strongly advocate reaching out to your skip level, so your manager's manager, to just develop regular cadence for conversation in case there are things that maybe your manager could do a little bit better. So I would suggest the quick fixes to go to the GitLab handbook and look at remote communications, pick out some of those ideas, ping your manager or your leadership and say, look, this is really cool. Maybe you should check this out. That would be my short answer.
Yeah, and Alexander had linked the GitHub handbook into the Keynote channel. So if anyone's looking for that, it is linked right there. And I've gone to the GitHub handbook numerous times.
So we're going to say GitLab because it's.
Oh, sorry. Good Lord. My bad.
That's okay. That's okay.
The GitLab handbook, which is the one I go to all the time for when I have questions like this myself about like certain kinds of like leadership or kind of direction type things. The GitLab handbook is a tremendous resource, and it is linked in the Keynote channel there. My apologies.
Cool. No worries, cool. But yeah, that will give you a lot more information than we can give you in a small short window.
For sure. Next question is around change management. Are there topics you might not discuss at large with the whole company?
Yes. Yes, there are topics. There, first of all, it's interesting working in a global company. There are laws that we have to follow across the world, right? And there are privacy laws and there are other laws, and some things cannot be discussed for legal reasons. So we always remain compliant, and unless there's a legal reason, we discuss it publicly. But if there are legal restrictions, and we're a publicly traded company, so there's certain things that we just can't say publicly or even
Yeah,
internally.
that's new. That's a new restriction you guys have got.
Yeah. So it's been fun.
I can only imagine. Yeah, I mean, even a small company like us, we still have people in many countries, and just keeping track of all those various
Yeah,
restrictions is really a challenge. So,
yeah.
but do you feel like that's limiting you in how you can move forward faster?
So it's not really my problem. Like legal handles that.
Yeah,
I just, nothing I do, I'm never slowed down by something, a law or anything in another country. I think that maybe the biggest impact could have been some countries don't allow weekend work. I think that's cool. So that might be the only thing that really impacts me. And we easily work around that.
yeah. Okay. Next question, Amy. If an issue needs attention and team members are distributed, how do you know someone is working on the issue and ensure that various team members aren't duplicating effort?
So we try to have a single source of truth. So when we start to see people on Slack and in the Google Doc in an issue, someone interrupts because we have a very low level of shame, and we're all allowed to say, wait a second, we need to have all this information in one place, and then we immediately course correct. And that's how we handle too many streams of information.
Excellent. Let's see if there's any more questions on here. Okay, one more from Alexander here. Do you see a difference in productivity in context of the work type? So maintaining legacy code is something that we see works perfectly remote and completely async, but developing something new, which needs maybe more quicker back and forth communication.
Do I see it as a challenge in a remote
Well,
environment?
do you see a difference in the productivity in the context of that work, those two kinds of work?
No, I think that I don't see any differences at all. No, to me, there's no difference. I don't see one.
Yeah, I guess maybe some people think that maybe legacy systems, you can kind of just set someone off on their way and they'll just go at it and fix up or eliminate tech debt without needing a lot of communication, or it can be more asynchronous.
We actually need a lot of communication for tech debt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we do. Because a lot of the tech debt, they're really hard problems. So in some cases, we want to maybe have a comprehensive solution. And it might be in more than one place. And we're looking at the bigger picture. And then we might have to have a working group or principals involved. So tech debt is not simple at all.
So
feature work is easier to me than tech debt.
There's the myth right there, that tech debt can be just completely asynchronous and disconnected from the rest of the group.
No, I have teams that do tech debt release after release. No, it's not simple.